Hey everybody, my name is Dom. In this video, I want to go over the mechanics of the Earth Sigil in Shadowverse Worlds Beyond, then touch on how experimenting with dirt in Worlds Beyond can be beneficial to a Shadowverse Evolve player. Let's start with how you get stacks in this game. There are three methods. The most common is to play a card that has an ability that says gain some number of sigils. These are mostly follower fanfares right now, but there is no reason they couldn't be last words in the future. While the first sigil requires you have an open board slot to fill, every subsequent sigil just adds to your already existing stack. That means if you have a stack and 3 followers, then fill your 5th board slot with a follower that gains sigils, you will still gain those sigils. In Shadowverse 1, you would have missed out. The next method is to play a main deck sigil. Currently, that is only Witch's New Brew. These always require an open board slot to be played. When they are played, the old stack will merge onto the new stack. That means if you have a board with a stack and 4 followers, you will not be able to play a card like Witch's New Brew. The final way to gain sigils is with the new engage mechanic. Once per turn, you can trade in 1 play point for 1 sigil. This is pretty nice to fill in your curve and offers the deck a steady stream of stacks without needing to include as many generators as Shadowverse 1. Important to note, you do need to have a stack on field already before you can use this ability. The once per turn rule on engage is game wide, so I would expect this rate of stack generation to be pretty normal for sets to come. Now, if we pay very close attention to the engage rule, we notice that the once per turn is per amulet. That means every stack has its own once per turn. The player is not the one with the once per turn restriction. In other words, if we find a way to get a new stack, we can use the engage ability multiple times in a turn. There are 2 techniques to perform engage juggling, or stack juggling, or whatever you want to call it. Think back to the previous slide. How did we gain new stacks? One was to play a card that gains sigils when we do not have any, and the other is to play a main deck sigil. That means if we want to juggle, we can consume a stack, then play a follower that gains sigils and engage that new stack. Or we can play Witch's New Brew. Alright, so here we are in the training mode, and I've got a little board state set up to demonstrate those rules for engage juggling. So we can start by clicking on Engage in-game, and we can see it says it can be activated once per turn. This is a game-wide ruling. But if we keep in mind what I said a moment ago, the once per turn is for every independent amulet. So if we find a way to get a new amulet, we will have a new once per turn. So let's go ahead and start by engaging this amulet, pay 1 play point, bam, we're at 2 stacks. And then we can play Edelweiss to consume this stack. Alright, stack's gone, empty board, no stack on the field. Now we can play Penelope and get 2 more sigils. That creates a new stack, separate amulet from the first one, and now we can see the engage is lit up again. So let's go ahead and pay a play point and engage it. Now we're up to 3 stacks. The next way to create a new amulet is to use a main deckable Earth Sigil, which currently is just Witch's New Brew. So let's play it, and if you notice, there will be 2 discrete amulets on the field, and then they merge afterwards, with the new amulet being played from hand becoming the new base. That means the once per turn is maintained from that new Witch's New Brew. So we can go ahead and click Engage again, and now we're up to 5 stacks. And just for demonstration purposes, we've got another Penelope here, and you can see it does not create a new sediment, it just adds to the one that's already on field, and therefore the engage does not light up again. To be thorough, let's go ahead and click this extra play point button from going second, and you can see the engage is still grayed out. It is not because we don't have enough to play, it's simply just not allowed. Now if we play another Witch's New Brew with that extra play point, you will see we don't have a play point, it's not glowing, so that was a necessary demonstration to prove the once per turn does require that you actually have the play point to use it. Why is this technique important? If we think about balancing tempo and value-oriented plays, juggling leans more to the side of value plays. We invest play points in building a resource without affecting the board. You could make some arguments that juggling does have an influence on your ability to make high-tempo plays. If taking part of an early turn to do a small Witch's New Brew juggle builds you enough stacks that you can skip a rebuild turn in the mid to late game, if it enables you to make 2 big spending turns back to back, you could maybe argue for it being tempo-oriented. Regardless of how you want to look at it, you need to balance spending play points now and spending them later. Another reason to do a juggle is to avoid overcommitting followers to the board. Besides Sage-like Teachings and Witch's New Brew, all generators are on followers with 2 or 3 health. Those can get blown out by a card like Apollo or Salefa. Juggle lines let you spend your play points on resource development that does not play into sweepers. More future-minded, over a long game, every juggle play adds to your total capacity of stacks. If we get a real mud guzzler card, something that really runs through a stack quickly or repeatedly, like Juno's Crest, every stack could matter. Any card that cares about the size of our stack also benefits from building up a stack quickly. Currently, that is just the fanfare on Juno. The last reason you should know how to do this is that sometimes you just have to do it. You have 2 stacks on the field, and you're looking at a hand with Edelweiss, Sage-like Teachings, and Witch's New Brew, and you need to find a way to clear the board. Without juggling, you don't have the stacks. With it, you do. Let's wrap up by applying some lessons from Worlds Beyond to Shadowverse Evolve. So, what is the value of a stack? In Evolve, I normally use Teachings of Creation as my point of reference. That's a 1 play point, hand neutral stack. While Witch's New Brew might look like the analog in Worlds Beyond, I think the better comparison is actually the once per turn engage. Why do I say that? A huge strength of Witch's New Brew is the fact that you can use it to juggle. While it may read basically identical to Teachings, the use of a juggle generates an extra resource. To some extent, you could read New Brew as pay 1, gain 1 stack with enhance 2, gain 2 stacks instead. There's a lot of reading between the lines with Witch's New Brew. That is not to say that engage is identical to Teachings. There is an inherent opportunity cost to a main deck stack. Teachings of Creation can eat your draw phase. It can take a slot in your mulligan or opening hand. Until you find the space to cash in on the cycle from Teachings, it restricts the options in your hand. To some degree, there is also consideration for the space it takes in your deck. There are pros and cons to that. The cycle from Teachings sort of decreases your deck size to 37, increasing the consistency of drawing your best cards. On the other hand, Evolve has cards that allow you to search your deck and tutor something up. If you have a card that you want to search, but don't really want to draw, Teachings makes it harder to fit those tutor targets into your deck, while also increasing the chance you draw it. Admittedly, all these kinds of opportunity cost are generally minor. However, card games have inherent variance, and part of playing these games is recognizing what choices influence your variance, no matter how small, because every 50-50 situation you sway in your favor adds up. Overall, I feel stacks in Evolve are more restrictive in deck building and more costly to build and in turn spend. The omnipresent access to engaging makes World Beyond sigils relatively cheaper. The next difference I want to look at is the way you spend stacks in both games. Currently, on the whole, I would say that Worlds Beyond favors a slow trickle of stack building and spending, and incentivizes you to maintain a large stack on field. A stack of 7+ is not unreasonable to achieve, and can be desirable. On the other hand, Evolve favors keeping your stack as close to 0 as possible. A stack of 7+ in Evolve I would consider to be a catastrophic disaster. There are certainly turns that you need to build a stack to prepare for, but you are building your stack with a specific count in mind and the intent to spend it quickly. Part of this does come down to card pool. Dirt in Worlds Beyond has only received half of its initial skeleton, so this could change, but I think the Earthright cards currently available, as well as the way the game generally plays, suggests that it will continue to be true. Dirt has very few proactive spenders in Worlds Beyond. Juno wants you to maintain a large stack to be able to efficiently trade up, and her crest, rather than spending 3 sigils at once, spends them over 3 turns, providing you the time to continue generating sigils without suddenly shrinking your stack. Edelweiss and Sage-like Teachings, your other largest spenders, are reactive removal options. These cards are much more difficult to use if you start a turn with only 1 or 2 stacks. Preemptively holding a large stack forces your opponent to respect your capacity for highly efficient removal. Generally, a large stack in Worlds Beyond is how you address an opponent's board without spending an Evo point. This is a strength of the mechanic I expect to be maintained in future sets. In Evolve, I feel the higher cost of gaining sigils leads to the pattern of spending them more aggressively. The more expensive an action is, the more quickly the payoff needs to come, or the stronger it needs to be. Again, I want to reiterate this is largely card pool driven, but it is also deeply related to my next thought. How does game pace affect the strength of the mechanic? Shadowverse Evolve is a much faster game. Access to forms of uninteractive damage are higher, and the game is designed around fighting for interactive damage to leverage that uninteractive damage. There are elements of this in Worlds Beyond, and the size of the card pool definitely contributes to this discrepancy, but I think the way trading works in the 2 games, as well as the strength of hoarding Evolve points in Worlds Beyond, will typically skew Evolve more towards high-tempo snowballs, and Worlds Beyond to attrition. In Evolve, the cost of developing stacks is generally quite high. In most matchups, giving up tempo to build multiple stacks is difficult. There is a serious need to quickly make powerful plays by spending stacks to take tempo back from the opponent. Coming out ahead on tempo through the mid-game makes the late-game storm and burn threatening. The deck's finishers are quite weak if strong plays are not made earlier in the game. Personally, I think the primary reason Dirt shot up in the game's meta was the release of cards that drastically, and I mean drastically, decreased the cost of those stacks. We'll see what happens when Set 2 releases, but I would not be surprised if we did not see a super bursty late-game storm or burn card. Inherently, the engage mechanic incentivizes Dirt to draw out the game. Every turn that goes by offers Dirt another opportunity to manifest a resource from thin air. I think Cygames is more likely to lean into an attrition-based direction for the archetype to take advantage of this mechanic. It also plays better into the strategy of saving Evolve points as long as possible. Thanks for checking out the video. I hope you enjoyed it, or at least found it a little bit informative. Maybe it gave you something to think about. If you feel like I didn't fully develop an idea here, or you just have thoughts of your own to add, absolutely leave a comment. I will read it. My focus currently is still on Shadowverse Evolve. My purpose with making this video was just to develop my understanding of Dirt in the context of that game by looking at it through a new lens. Again, hope you enjoyed the video. Bye!